In my last video, the one about global warming, I said that my next video was going to be called How to Fix the Economy. When I started working on that video, I realized I had to explain what was wrong with the economy in the first place. So I decided to split them into two parts because trying to explain what was wrong with the economy started running on a little bit long. In this video, the only policy that you're going to get from me is balancing the budget, which is a very crucial component of the plan to fix the economy. But for the most part, consider this video a primer for my video, which will come out next week, which will be called How to Fix the Economy. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the video.
What is wrong with the economy that needs fixing? I'm sure you have some ideas. I've got some ideas too. Let's talk about the ideas that are out there. The big one that you're going to hear from conservatives or the right wing is inflation. It's a good kind of catch-all because I think a lot of people don't fully understand inflation. It's pretty easy to blame on immigrants. You might also hear from the right wing that immigrants are a problem with the economy, but that's more of a social commentary than an actual economic analysis. Immigration has positive and negative effects on the economy. It depends on the effect that you want and the plans overall for like a given sector of the economy. So I kind of refuse to accept that immigration on its face is a problem with the economy, which is why I say the right-wing critique of the economy right now is inflation. That's why Donald Trump wants the interest rates to go down, and that's why they're doing this whole thing with the chair of the Federal Reserve at the moment. It's because the right-wing critique is that inflation is too high. The leftist explanation, and I'm using leftist very loosely, is basically a concentration of wealth. A few people who have so much money that the economy sucks. You're gonna hear different versions of that analysis from different versions of leftists. You'll hear Gary Stevenson say that we need to tax wealth, not work. That's a good catchphrase. I think both the left and the right have true critiques of the economy, and I think that it is telling that there isn't really a liberal critique of the economy. Prices on the stock market continue to be on the rise. As soon as you have your centrist Democrats, your basic liberals, saying that the concentration of wealth is too high, they become, in my very loose phrasing, a leftist. Some more specific problems with the economy is housing and education have both skyrocketed in price in recent years. Housing is unaffordable for a lot of people, even just to rent. Basic healthcare is unattainable for a lot of people, even just like checkups or going to the dentist. It's literally unaffordable for a lot of people. And the people who can afford it, they're unable to change jobs, which feels kind of strange to me. I think it's a fantastic critique of Obamacare, that it basically forces you to work in a free country. Should not really be our healthcare solution. That's not what I'm talking about right now, though. Another issue with today's economy, it's very difficult to find a job that pays well, whether you are college educated or not. So I think all of those problems are completely real. As I've already said, I don't think immigration constitutes a problem with the economy, but inflation, wealth concentration, the price of housing, healthcare, and education, and the difficulty of finding a job that pays well in any sector of the economy, those are all effective analysis of the issues with the economy. My main argument in this video is that there has been a fundamental shift in the economy sometime between like the 1960s and today, from a consumer-focused economy to an investor-focused economy. I think it's the reason for all of those problems that I just explained. And I also want to point out this shift in the economy was fundamentally a result of government action, and the government could change the economy back or completely renovate it. My first goal is to convince you of that shift. Then I'll be convincing you that it was a result of government action, mainly taxation policy. Although we can talk about a lot of other ways that the government has mishandled the economy in the last 50 or so years. After I demonstrate to you that the shift from a consumer-focused economy to an investor-focused economy happened as a result of government action, then we're going to be talking about some solutions or how to fix the economy. We're going to be making some establishments, and we're going to be pointing some things out. This is the part where I'm going to be spelling out facts and my feelings, but what I'm hoping to resonate with your feelings. This is an ongoing conversation. I know that the video is called How to Fix the Economy, but it's not the ultimate guide. I don't know everything, neither do you. And that's why we're getting together and talking about this stuff. And I also, before we get into this, I want to say to everyone watching, whether you are a capitalist, fiscal conservative, or a revolutionary communist, or an anarchist, or a socialist who thinks money should be abolished, I'm making this video because I want the best for society, and I assume you're watching it because you want the same. I am not here to confirm your worldview. Whether you agree or disagree with me is your own decision, not the decision of the political party that you subscribe to. First, let's get some unity going. I already explained the main issues of the conservative and the leftists are inflation and wealth inequality. I want to point out they actually do feed into each other. Wealth inequality causes inflation in the housing market, the education market, and the stock market. I want to point out that the stock market has been on the rise despite the fact that I'm making this video, because I believe that the economy has been crumbling for years, as I can attest and as other members of the working class can attest. I guess I'm not a member of the working class, am I? I own property. That makes me a member of the middle class. Yeah, I guess before we go any further, I think I'm a member of the middle class, as I am property owning and I will be inheriting property from my parents. My parents are kind of like the British version of middle class, somewhat wealthy from property ownership, but they both earn wages to pay the bills. Inequality causes inflation in the price of housing because we treat houses like investments. People who are wealthy, they have a larger percentage of income to invest. They will invest that money in property. As the investing class grows wealthier and wealthier, these investments, like housing, like education, will naturally increase in price. Houses, education, they are not products for consumers. They are investments for investors. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not anti-investment. Just to soothe any fiscal conservatives out there who think I'm trying to kind of sublimate, like that you should become a communist or something. I'm not a communist. I'm making a critique of the system. I'm not saying that we need to throw it out. Okay? I wouldn't be making a video called How to Fix the Economy if I wanted to abolish the economy. So I also have to point out that inflation leads to an unequal distribution of wealth, at least under the current system. This is because when inflation happens, which it is always happening, and a worker does not receive a wage, that worker's wages have effectively reduced. What we call this is a lowering of real wages. Real wages are wages measured against inflation. So when real wages decrease, employers' profits increase. That's because prices increase with inflation, but what the employees are paid does not. I'm not saying it never does, but I'm saying unless the worker receives a raise, real wages are constantly decreasing and have been since 1971. Hey everybody, I'm going to interrupt what I was saying just then to explain to you guys an important concept. It's probably the foundation of monetarism. I'm going to go ahead and explain to you guys this model, and we're going to use this model to explain this concept. Concept is called a multiplicative effect. Now, this model is not representative of reality. This model only exists for me to help explain to you guys what is going on here. So this is a macroeconomic concept, but we're applying it on a microscopic scale. So I want to explain the model. Each of these squares represents one person. That person needs food, and they also sell a meal, okay, for $1. The way that we can say this is that there is a total demand for $8 worth of production. Does that make sense to you guys? There's 8 squares, so there's a demand for $8 worth of production. Now, there's only one issue. There's only $1, and this dollar is not $8. So how is everybody going to eat? Well, this first guy, he's going to take his dollar to the next guy. He pays him for a meal, and now, so this guy's got a meal. Cha-ching. So now this guy's got the dollar. He needs a meal, so he's going to take it to the next guy. He gets a meal. Cha-ching. He paid $1 for it. Now this guy's got the dollar. This guy is going to go to the next guy. Cha-ching. And so on and so forth, right? I mean, you guys understand this. The dollar gets spent more than one time in the day. And $8 worth of goods are produced by the end of the day. And that production is facilitated only by spending $1. So this may seem like kind of an obvious concept, but it is, like I say, the foundation of monetarism is the idea, as opposed to bartering, where you trade consumable resources. Both sides consume the resources that they're trading. With a dollar, the dollar persists. One side gets a consumable resource and the other side gets a unit of exchange. This is how money allows people to get what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and all the options that they want it. It is the reason that we have money in a modern society with modern values. I look crazy on this camera. So what are the implications of this? I'll explain to you the implications of this. What this means is that the more the dollars are able to circulate throughout a system, the more that dollar is actually worth. I mean, imagine if we had a demand for production of, say, 4. Well, this dollar would have facilitated 4 transactions in that day. But since the demand is 8, this dollar is literally worth more. Okay? So what this shows is that when a dollar is traded for a good, it has a deflationary effect. Again, this model is a very small scale, and we're about to go over some of the limitations of this model. But I want to point out as well, everybody in this system got what they needed. And there were no victims, there were no issues. Everybody used the dollar for the unit of exchange, and everybody left happy. Nobody got more than they paid for, and nobody got scammed out of their resources. With the explanation of the multiplicative property out of the way, I'm sure you have some questions. If you're an anarchist, you're probably saying, well, why didn't all of those people just share? That's a fair point. Those people could have shared very easily and not needed to spend money to get all of their meals, right? You're absolutely correct, anarchists. And a limitation with this model, why it doesn't depict the real world, is its size. I mean, there's only 8 people. There's a demand of $8 worth of production, and there's only $1 in the system. Also, its locality. Each of the products are being manufactured and sold by the same individual. What I mean by this is that in this model, there is no rent-seeking behavior. There are no middlemen. And once you add middlemen in, I mean, imagine that model that we just went over. Imagine it with a landlord charging rent. Well, then why do we have landlords? You're right. If we didn't have a capital owning class, then we could all just share. That's the argument for communism. You're right. You are exactly right. I guess this is going to feel like a cop-out answer. The world is a certain way today. We have landlords today. We have a capital owning class today. They're not all bad people, and you wouldn't get away with killing all of them anyways. So you and them are going to have to get along for a little while. You guys are going to have to establish a just system where everybody is taken care of before you abolish capital ownership or whatever it is that you want to do. I'm not here to debate you if you're a communist. I think that your criticism of the model is absolutely correct. But I also think that the model holds a lot of value. The fact that dollars circulating can make us all more prone to what is essentially just sharing. If everybody has dollars, then everybody can get what they need to survive and be happy. So we live in a society where we have a system of capital. People own the deeds to land. The critique of capitalism is that, well, not everybody can own Facebook and the patents to make sure that nobody else can make Facebook. Not everybody can own a global supply chain and the ability to enforce yourself as a monopoly in that global supply chain. Not everybody can own a chain of grocery stores. The people who own those things, which are societal needs, we need to be able to ship things. We need to be able to buy groceries, right? You understand? Those people are extremely powerful and extremely wealthy because they're able to extract rent.
I clicked on YouTube on the website and it's immediately showing me an ad.
I think I've drawn a picture pretty well at this point. I want to make it very clear. Investors are the capital owning class. People who are wealthy enough to invest their money in things that are not needs, okay? Whether that is starting a business, buying a second house, going to college. All of these things are investments and they require a certain amount of wealth or they require you to go into debt. And I want to again draw attention to my argument that we have moved from a consumer focused economy in the 1960s towards an investor-focused economy today. Before you write a comment about the power of the free market and how I'm a millennial who loves avocado toast and I don't know what I'm talking about, or before you write a comment that says we need to abolish capitalism, I want to draw your attention to the fact that, well, there was a time where prosperity was possible in America. It wasn't equitably distributed, but it was easy for members of the working class, non-property owning individuals, to become members of the middle class, by which I mean purchase a house and pay it off before the end of your life. And today that's not possible, at least not for people without privilege. If you follow the channel, you know that me and my brother were able to purchase this house with the help of our family. That was only with the help of our family. Somebody who makes my income and my brother's income, we could not really afford rent. The rent was just too high, and it was relatively low rent. We both make relatively decent wages. Before we declare our allegiance to a specific ideology, we need to say that the economy used to offer more to people. It really did. We have not had a balanced budget in America since 2001. What the fuck? Ronald Reagan doubled the national debt. Having a balanced budget is the substantial policy action to take against inflation. It's really the most effective thing that the government could possibly do to halt inflation, because when you have a balanced budget, you don't have to print money to pay your bond debts. Printing money to pay our bond debts is the reason that there has been a constant amount of inflation built into the economy. The other thing that causes inflation is individuals going into debt. The two causes of inflation are government debt and individual debt, both of which have been skyrocketing lately, as you can probably see from a graph. I'm not even making this shit up. It's crazy. Why does the government choose to remain insolvent? Because let's be clear, it is a choice. That's a good question. If I was going to be a conspiracy theorist for a second, I would say that the government is largely made up of the capital owning class, who, if they don't actually employ people, they know other members of the capital owning class who do. And inflation helps employers because it decreases real wages. As real wages decrease and wealth concentration increases in the upper classes, that helps all members of the capital owning class. And the reason for that is because the capital owning class owns stock, and as wealth concentration increases, stock prices increase. This is why the government chooses to remain insolvent, and this is one of the reasons why the economy has been getting worse year over year. The issue is both inflation and wealth concentration. They feed into each other. They do. So what are the risks of the current system? Well, the government prints the money. People are losing respect for the value of the dollar. This is borne out in the subjective understanding that we all have of inflation. Shit's more expensive now because the dollar is worth less. And there's one major risk, which is global economy collapse, because the United States dollar is the world reserve currency. If the government remains insolvent, then the dollar will continue to lose its value. Either there will be a global economy crash, or what is more likely is most countries on the globe will change to using the Chinese yen as the way to insure their banks. I explained the reason why I think this is bad in my previous video about global warming. Check that one out if you're interested in this one. So understanding this risk is crucial to understanding the dysfunction with the United States economy. Our money is bleeding in value. It has been since the early 2000s. It obviously hurts the working class for reasons I've already explained. And let's define what I mean by the working class. The working class is the non-property owning class. You can tell them to get a Robinhood account and start investing, but we both know, when we're being honest with ourselves, it's not the same as a small loan of $1 million to start your hotel chain. It's time to discuss consumerism. So today the word consumerism is kind of used as a pejorative, basically to describe like wasteful spending. Consumerism is basically the idea that the goal of the economy is to provide the highest value to the consumer. A consumer is anybody who's buying a product, whether it's groceries or entertainment, like your Nintendo Switch 2. Consumerism naturally means reducing rent-seeking behavior. What I mean by rent-seeking behavior is not just like literally landlords seeking rent, but John Deere having like a $3,000 a day subscription to have one of their special technicians work on the tractor. Because they have the power to limit your options and charge you more, they will.
This is going to be difficult if you have not heard it yet. I want you to open your heart,
According to constitutional law, slavery is legal in certain circumstances in America. The American Constitution explicitly in text names slavery and protects the practice of it. Apart from being incredibly immoral, the practice does actually depress wages. It brings wages down. When you can pay somebody 13 cents to do basic labor, like farm labor or manufacturing, well, then you set the value of labor in that market. And that is rent-seeking behavior. That is rent-seeking behavior, okay? I'm not making this up. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm not. You might think I'm insane, but I'm not. Slavery is an explicitly protected practice under the United States Constitution. The text is on screen right now. Just read it and think about the implications of it. And open your heart, for God's sake. Open your heart. Slavery is real. Isn't that insane? It's still real, and we talk about it like it's over. That's insane. It's insane.
That's rent-seeking behavior. It benefits investors and it hurts consumers. So consumerism means less rent-seeking behavior. Consumerism also inherently means either providing a higher quantity of products or providing a higher quality of products. Consumerism is all about delivering the most value to the consumer. So if you spend money, you get what you paid for. Hell, maybe even more. We can think about in the past. You know how people say they don't make them like they used to? It's really true. I mean, my main example is cars. Y'all know on this channel I love the 1998 CRV. I think that's probably the best car, the 1998 Honda CRV. If you look at the CRV model today, it is no longer a compact recreational vehicle. It is an objectively worse product for more than one reason. It is less spacious. It has a screen in it with a really slow operating system. So even doing something like turning your music up or down takes like 30 minutes. And heaven forbid you try to pair your phone to it. It is a worse product that is more expensive. And I think if you try to make a connection in your own mind, you can think of a kind of product that was better 20 years ago or 40 years ago. They've gotten more expensive and actually provided less value to you as a consumer. So the opposite of consumerism is investorism, which is the idea that the goal of the economy is to provide the highest profits to investors. I think that the economy has gotten worse due to specific decisions made by the government that shifted the economy from a consumerist economy to an investorist economy.
What specific decisions did the government make to cause these problems? And there's more than one thing that we can point to. It's not all taxation, but taxation is a large component of it because taxation is how you forge the economic incentives that influence the decision making of everybody. So this is a graph from the Concord Coalition. I really like this graph because it's nice and simple, and we're going to talk about it. But first, the ethics of taxation. There's three kinds of income that are going to be taxed, at least represented on this graph. And those are individual income, capital gains, and dividends. I'm going to explain those. Individual income is your wages or your salary. It's what you get from your employer for doing work. Capital gains is what they call income from selling investments. So if you sell a house, if you sell your stocks, you're paying capital gains tax, unless those stocks are in like a tax-free account managed by a firm. Like for example, an IRA is exempt from certain kinds of taxes because it's a retirement account. So an IRA, a 401k, that stuff is mostly not going to be subject to capital gains and dividends. These taxes are subjected to individuals who are investing. So the last one, dividends, is passive income from investments. This is just income that you make from ownership. When I say passive income, I don't necessarily mean that the person who owns the stock or whatever, I don't mean that they're doing no work, but what I mean is they are receiving income from the appreciation of the investment and not as compensation for their labor. If you were to look at individual capital gains and dividends, in which order would you put them? Individual, capital gains, dividends. So I'll tell you exactly my thinking on the matter. Dividends tax should probably be taxed the highest
because it is passive income, which means it's not directly compensating your labor, which means it is the least likely to be earned. A true-blooded capitalist would say, well, savvy investing is actually earning that income. And I would say, you're right. Savvy investing is a way to earn income. That's great. I'm not here to take away your right to invest. What I'm saying, though, is that this passive income should be taxed the highest as opposed to earned income and capital gains. So taxed less than dividends should be capital gains. This is because, well, you're selling. So it means that you have done whatever you were going to do with the investment. You invest, you put in work, you reshape the company, you renovate the house, you do whatever it is that you're doing to the investment, and then you sell it. So capital gains, more so than dividends, implies hard work, not just discerning investment, but actual sweat equity was put into the investment. Is it possible to buy land, sit on it for 10 years, and sell it for a profit without doing anything? Yes. So people who sell investments are not like morally better than people who make dividends from their investments. I'm not here to moralize. I'm only here to moralize if you believe that work is inherently moral, which I do. I'm somebody who takes great pride in my labor. My dad is somebody who takes great pride in his labor. He taught me that from a very young age. He's also an investor. He invests in houses and we fix them up. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I'm not making moral judgments from an alienated position. I believe that these taxes should be ordered in a way where the one that requires the least amount of work to make some money is taxed the most, and the one that requires the most amount of work to make some money is taxed the least. Which brings me to individual income. This should obviously be taxed the least. I mean, it's your wages. It is the only tax that the working class is going to end up paying, the tax that they made on money from working. So it should be the least out of these three. A note about this graph, the orange line is the top marginal tax rate. I'm gonna have to pull up the tax brackets now. Now we're on the IRS website. Just for a quick refresher, these are the tax brackets in 2024. Right now, the top rate is 37%. What the top marginal tax rate is, basically, as you make more income per year than $609,351, your effective tax rate approaches 37%. Today, the top marginal tax rate is approaching 37%. Okay, so we just had a discussion about the ethics of taxation. Something interesting is happening. First, I want to look at this period right here before we go over the history. Why is it the opposite of what I said? I mean, why is it the opposite of what I said? This dashed blue line should be above the orange line, or at least matching the orange line. And yet dividends and capital gains are so much lower than earned income. So this is income from working, and it's taxed more than income from investing. Does that really make sense to you guys? I don't think that this is a radical thought. I've already explained, I'm not a communist. I'm going to stop trying to qualify everything I'm saying with I'm not a communist. But seriously, does it make sense that money from work is taxed more than money from buying and selling things? It makes really no sense to me, unless you were going with the argument that, well, we want investments from the private sector to enter into the consumer economy and stimulate demand via, like we said, the multiplicative effect. So you say, well, there's individuals saving money, they're going to spend it. There's individuals making money off of their investments, they're going to spend it, and then due to the multiplicative effect, that's going to increase economic activity and everybody's going to be happy. That's the argument for this. I can't write that argument off because it does make sense. What also makes sense is that, well, at a certain point, you're gonna make your money from your investments. You might spend some of it on consumables, right? You might increase that circulation. You're also gonna reinvest it. So this tax structure where the investments are taxed less, it might make sense for a short period of time where you want to encourage investment and circulation, but the longer you let it go, the longer you're going to let wealth accrue in the hands of investors, capital owners. And because these are taxed less than earned income, you are punishing the working class. The longer this goes, the more you're punishing the working class. So I want to take a look at now the whole history of it. The beginning of this graph is pre-Great Depression. This is what the tax rates were in the early 1900s. I can't remember his name. Do nothing. All I remember about him is do nothing. Do Nothing Hoover. Do Nothing Hoover. He was like, oh shit, the economy's about to collapse. We need to lower all the taxes. So that the thinking behind that is, I already explained it. You lower the taxes, you increase circulation, and the economy starts back up again. Unfortunately, if you can't actually answer lowering the taxes with, say, opening new businesses so you have new job openings so that the economy can actually start up again, and instead, oh great, the investing class can now increase their investments. That's basically what happened with the Great Depression. Is there was a massive stock market collapse which caused the banks to collapse because the banks were investing in the stock market as well. They were leveraging debt over stocks. The point of the matter is the banks got so over leveraged because the taxes were so low. And this is, to jump a little bit forward, this is the same thing that happened in 2008. Great Depression happens, FDR wins the presidency, and taxes go back up, at least dividends and individual income. And something I want to note is that even during Do Nothing Hoover's reign, the dividends tax only gets slightly below the top marginal tax rate. And throughout all of the post-Great Depression era, this is like, you might say the pre-neoliberal era, but really neoliberalism came about in this era. It wasn't, we don't need to talk about neoliberalism. It's a buzzword. In the pre-Kennedy era, how about we call it that? Your dividends and your top marginal income tax rate are the same. Look at that. I mean, they're almost 1-to-1 throughout all of the most prosperous time in American history. This is when the baby boomers were born. This is when Walmart started. This is when McDonald's started. This is when America became America, is our tax system was like this. Dividends is linked to the top marginal income tax rate. As I explained, the dividends tax should be even higher, but I think there's also just a fine reason to say, well, earned income is the same as investment dividends, like on a moral level, because, you know, shrewd investing and hard work, it's all the same to a capitalist. Sure, they should be the same. How about we just say they're the same? That would make me happy. But look at this. 1963. This is the year that John F. Kennedy is assassinated. The activity of the graph begins to change, right? Doesn't it? Almost immediately, the tax rate gets lowered. The corporate tax rate too gets lowered? What the hell? That's kind of strange, isn't it? The president dies and then there's this drastic change. Kind of strange to me. I'm not saying it's evidence of, like, say, a coup or anything, but I don't know. It's a little bit suspicious because, well, things were going all right. I mean, things were going just fine by the early 60s. Certainly better than they are now. It's kind of like, well, what changed? Hey, who am I to say? I don't know anything. The tax rates start to go down, but because dividends and individual tax rates are still locked in, you have still a period of prosperity up until, look at this, Ronald Reagan's election. Ronald Reagan gets elected. Look at what happens. Look at what happens during the Reagan to Bush era. What on earth were they thinking? I already mentioned Ronald Reagan doubled the national debt. So this is can I say that this is fucking retarded? Why, if you were going to spend a bunch of money on coups in Nicaragua and selling crack to black people to get them addicted and militarizing your police and giving them weapons to kill black people with, why, if you're going to do all of that, would you reduce these taxes? Unless you were working for somebody other than the American people. Unless you were, I don't know, trying to cause damage to the systems that actually built America during this time. I'm just suggesting that maybe it was a bad idea while the national debt is skyrocketing. Maybe it's a bad idea to cut the fucking taxes so drastically. Okay, but let's look at this. Things kind of stabilized for the Bush years, and this is how it was when my parents were growing up, and I think most people can remember the 80s fondly as a good time for the economy and the whole world. I mean, Star Wars was coming out. Wow! Reagan and his administration fought really hard for this tax cut, and we can blame him for a lot. I don't think the taxes really should have been cut if you were also going to increase spending drastically on the military to fund coups in other countries. Well, bad budgeting and also just like evil, because you're trying to do coups in other countries. I think that's evil. Like, if the people don't want it and if people that you're killing aren't doing anything bad. And again, if you're funding the coup by having the Nicaraguan Contra army sell cocaine to the CIA and then having the CIA distribute that cocaine onto the streets, predominantly to black people. Well, also criminalizing drugs so as to imprison and enslave black people, which drives wages down, as I already mentioned, and again is evil. This video is about the economy, not morality, so we can move on to the early 2000s. Again, let's look at what happens. 9/11, George Bush Jr. What the hell? So I think most people can say, oh, everything changed in 9/11. The early 2000s is when the economy started getting really quite bad, especially leading up to 2008, which I mentioned briefly. This is what we have in the collective imagination, is that the early 2000s is when the economy started getting bad. This is also true. The early 2000s is when things started to get pretty bad. Look, this is when dividends are decoupled from individual income tax and lowered drastically. Look at that. Look at how low it is for this period in the early 2000s leading up to 2008 economic crash and beyond. Look at how low that is. It's irresponsible. This is irresponsible governance, especially while the individual income tax is still so high, because all this is doing is putting money into the pockets of investors at the expense of the working class bearing more of the tax burden. I mean, that's all it is. It's selling out the working class to benefit investors. And again, not a communist. Investment is great. I love investment. Yay. But can you genuinely think of a reason why money made from you definitely did work for somebody should be taxed more than money made from you definitely bought something? I'm not saying you didn't do work. Really that makes sense to you? No, it doesn't. I mean, this everything that has happened since 9/11, and really since, I will say, Ronald Reagan got elected, and really I'll say since John F. Kennedy got killed, these drastic decreases in the tax rates, they have effects, okay? To the fiscal conservatives out here saying like, oh no, the taxes should be low. I agree. Taxes should be low. Individual income should be the lowest. Dividends should at least be locked to the individual income tax level. That would make me happy. But why I'm complaining about low taxes? I care more that the budget is balanced than that rich people pay less in taxes, okay? And I want to go back to the tax brackets. The top anybody's going to pay individual income is approaching 37%. And that's only over $609,000. I'm just saying, add 2 or 3 tax brackets with higher tax rates so that the top marginal tax rate is higher and the tax burden on people of this income level, making this level of income, are taxed less. If you make less than $609,351 a year, you pay too much in taxes. I agree that you pay too much in taxes, and I would like to lower the tax burden for you. I think you pay too much. I'm not lying to you, because you work for this money. This money is only taxed because you worked for it. That's what individual income tax is. It's money that you worked for. We've already talked about how important it is that we need to balance the budget. In this next section, I'm going to explain to you guys my proposal for how to balance the budget. All right, are you ready? We're gonna go quickly. First, a general overview. This is the 2025 spending from the Government Spending Explorer on usaspending.gov. So this is official data. The highest expense every year is Medicare. I'm gonna explain to you guys in the next part of this my plan to improve the American healthcare system. I think that repealing and replacing Medicare would save at least $500 billion every year. I think it could save a lot more, and I'm going to get into that in the next episode, but we're going to say conservatively we can save $500 billion. And you're going to have to trust me on that until next week when the next part of this comes out and I can explain to you guys my plan for repealing and replacing Medicare. Next up, we need to talk about interest. This is the 4th largest expense, and this is actually the reason why we need to balance the budget. Right now, the current system, we're throwing away $1.3 trillion every year in interest. And for as long as the budget is not balanced, we pay $1.3 trillion for the privilege of paying more next year, okay? This is terrible. I've already explained how it causes inflation because we have to print money in order to pay it, and printing money is the thing that causes inflation. But not only that, because the United States dollar is the world reserve currency, if we continue on this path, paying $1.3 trillion in interest every year and growing every year, the dollar will eventually collapse, and with it, the world economy, unless the world economy switches to Chinese yen as the world reserve currency, which I've explained multiple times why that's a bad idea. So something I want to point out is while we're paying $1.3 trillion a year, we can go up here to the national debt and just look, we're only $37 trillion in debt. If the budget was balanced, then It would only take about 40 years to be completely debt-free as a country. The effects would be so stabilizing that it would be insane. I mean, when I think about what we could do 40 years from now if we do the right things today, it is very inspiring. I mean, it's not even outlandish, because I'm going to explain to you guys in this section how we can balance the budget and turn those 1.3 trillion in interest payments into 1.3 trillion a year in principal payments. And in 40 years or less, we could be completely out of debt as a nation. Next, we're talking national defense. I'm not a defense expert. Obviously, I'm a guy in my room. I have some ideas, some things that I've heard, and I've got some estimates. I'm going to be conservative and say that I think we could save at least $100 billion from the national defense budget, and I've got some proposals for that. So starting with getting rid of no bid contracts, and what this is basically when the government needs equipment for the military, we go to companies like Ball Mason, Northrop Grumman, GE, take your pick, all the military contractors that also make appliances that are in your house, Berkshire Hathaway, all of those. What used to happen when we were a nation at war and it was really important that we had the best equipment is the generals, the president, whoever was in charge of this kind of thing would see multiple firms. We would tell them what we needed from them, and they would come to us with a product. We would test the product, compare them, get quotes from the different companies, and the different contractors would have to compete for the business of the US government to buy their product and equip our military with it. Now, in the modern day, you have increasingly what's called no bid contracts, which is basically when we decide we want a piece of equipment, we will just approach a company, they'll name their price, and we'll give it to them. The reason that it works so frictionlessly is because a lot of our top generals in the military, I mean, especially, we could talk about with the Trump administration, the corruption there, but our government and our national defense has been corrupt for a very long time. A lot of these guys who are awarding the contracts work for the companies or used to work for the companies or have family who works for the companies that they're awarding the contracts to. They're basically giving themselves money. And so getting rid of that mechanism, making it so that the government has to review, say, like 5 potential contracts, and those contracts, they have to compete with each other to lower the price that the government will pay. This would probably save more than $100 billion in our national defense budget alone. But again, I'm not an expert, and that's why I'm being very conservative with my estimate of saying we could probably cut $100 billion from the national defense budget. I also think we generally need to reduce our activity overall. We do a lot of foreign interference. Problem, I think that we should be a peaceful nation. I think that we should speak softly and carry a big stick. And that's why I'm saying we're not going to get rid of the national defense budget, but I am saying we need to be doing less, because the stick means more when we can hold it above our enemy's head. And when we use it as a bargaining chip with Ukraine, it means less, because when we compromise our morality in exchange for money, like what our representatives are doing with Israel, using defense as a bargaining chip to get things from them, what it does is it devalues the idea of America as the world peacekeeper. It's never too late for a country to change its policies. We could change. We could be what we want to be, and it just depends on what we want to be. I also think we need to elect a good president who is willing to walk through the national defense complex and actually make sensible and informed cuts and changes to the way that things are structured. I am talking about something like the Doge, which I think could be rolled into the IRS, but we could talk about that more in the next part of this video. This is a job for a highly qualified president who can make recommendations to Congress, who will carry out the president's will as the chief executive. I'm not going to touch on Social Security. I don't know anything about that. So these are the current tax brackets. I have my proposals on screen for what I think the tax brackets should be. You can review and compare. Make sure to leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this. If we do adopt my proposed tax brackets that we're seeing on screen, then we could at least get another $1 trillion from the income tax, as well as bringing in another $1 trillion from raising the dividends tax to the top marginal tax rate as it was historically. And for that, we can go back to the Concord Coalition. Here's that graph again. My proposal would have the top marginal income tax tax rate at 75%, which it was for, 10 years in the most profitable time in American history. So again, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not just saying it like a blind socialist. I'm talking about we actually had a good economy in this time. I'm not making an extreme proposal. It would be an extreme change from what we have today, but it's not an extreme departure. Really, it is a moderate stance that has been dressed up as something like insane. And when I talk about linking dividends to be the top marginal tax rate, again, that's how it was before 9/11 for the last 100 years. So this is not an insane thing. I mean, it's not our fault that George Bush thought that this was a good idea. We just need to fix it. So yeah, the top marginal tax rate being up to 75%, and then the dividends tax rate being up to 75%. Those are probably going to bring in at least $1 trillion each. Those are rough estimates. We're doing this on the back of a napkin, okay, guys? Because I'm not on Capitol Hill writing the bills. I'm not in the Oval Office signing them. I don't think that the burden is on me to have every single number already mathed out. They're going to change every single year. So there's one more thing I want to show you guys on this website. They cite CBO, which projects that tax expenditures, or more commonly referred to as loopholes, will total $2.1 trillion in 2024. What that means is that the government currently refunds more than the national deficit. We basically want that number to go down. I think that we could reduce it by about $1 trillion easily and still keep lots and lots of tax incentives for the middle and lower class. I already included a tax cut in my proposal for the income tax brackets, so I'm going to say that it comes out in the wash. And again, we're doing this on the back of a napkin. I think we can save about $1 trillion with reforms to the IRS and tax code in general. So I know I've gone very fast in this section about balancing the budget, but here we are. 2025, the deficit is $1.78 trillion. I think that closing tax loopholes could net us $1 trillion. I think that the changes I've proposed to taxation could net us $2 trillion. I talked a little bit about how national defense audits could save us at least $100 billion, and I'll talk more in my next episode about my plan to repeal and replace Medicare, which I think could at least save us $500 billion per year. So if you're following along at home, that is $3.6 trillion in savings or increased revenue. If you take the deficit of $1.78 trillion and add the surplus that I'm proposing we could get of $3.6 trillion, then you get $1.82 trillion in surplus. I'm talking about basic changes to the way that we spend money, which we have always needed in this country. We're going to talk more in the next part of this video, not just about my repeal and replace Medicare plan, but all of my plans for each individual section of the government that I have a plan for. So please stay tuned for that. It should come out next Sunday.
So balancing the budget, in short, will require increasing certain taxes, which we just went over, as well as decreasing certain spending, which we also just went over. When we're in the later part of this video and we talk about ways that the government should be spending money, it's in the comments asking, how am I going to pay for that? I just explained to you how the budget will be balanced. I explained to you how I explained to you how we have extra money to spend, and I've explained to you how, remember that model from earlier? When the government has extra money to spend, if it can get that money into the pockets of individuals who will spend it as well, then you get a multiplier of economic benefit. So I don't really want to hear, what about, how are you going to pay for that? What about this? What about that? No, you can bring me an actual argument, but I'm not about to deal with whataboutisms from you just clutching your pearls about fiscal conservatism. No, you and I both know that has gone too far. I've explained to you how the budget will be balanced. I would like you to at least consider my proposals for spending. With the secondary question, what's wrong with the economy, resolved, we can start asking, well, how do we fix the economy? A big part of this is lowering inflation. Lowering inflation is half of the battle. The other half of the battle is ensuring a high level of growth. Now, the common economic wisdom is that growth and inflation go hand in hand. That's only because the common economic wisdom is that lowering interest rates causes growth. Really, it just makes debt cheaper. So you get growth from people going into debt, and debt causes causes inflation. There's ways to achieve growth without going into debt, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I need to explain. Lastly, the last thing I need to explain before we can start talking about how to fix the economy, what do I mean by growth? Growth is an increase in both profits and currency circulation. I don't know how other people define it, and honestly, I don't really care to find out. Growth is not about stock markets increasing. It's not about any of that silly stuff. Growth is about an increase in local business profits, and it's about an increase in currency circulation. So the recipe for prosperity is an economy that has high growth and low inflation. Just remember that as we move on throughout this video.
Well, everybody, I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of how to fix the economy. You'll notice I was referring to the video itself as though it was going to be one part at some points in this video, and that's because I thought it was going to be one part before I decided it would be more than one. Apologies for any confusion. You can think of it like Kill Bill 1 and 2. They're one movie, but it's 2 releases. You understand? Anyways, like, subscribe, stay tuned for the next one. I appreciate you guys listening and watching all the way to the end. Please leave a comment. Tell me what you think so far about everything that I've said. I want this to actually do good for the world, not just like talking. I hope you guys can tell that I'm pretty serious about this stuff, and I want it to. I'm not just being theoretical. I'm talking about how to actually improve our lives. Even if you make over $400,000 in a year and I would raise taxes on you by 3%, I'm not asking to use your money for like gay parades or whatever. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it.